In this example, we should decide whether we should capture on d3 or not capture on d3. And well, at the first glance, it will somehow remind us from the previous example. We see the capture on d3 and immediately rook d1, and our heart will start bumping. But compared to the previous example here, we see that we have an emergency solution with e4, which wasn't given in the previous example, because this way, at least for sure, we don't lose material. We have just to consider whether e4 is enough for us to be happy about or not. Now after e4, I think the only logical move is to calculate the capture on d3. I mean, rook takes d3 doesn't make sense. It just loses material because white sacrifices the exchange and I don't see the compensation. So bishop takes d3, e takes d3 is the only logical reply. E takes f3, not a good idea because of the undiscovered check on g6. So that's why e takes d3, and here we spot one check on e4 in order to capture the guy on d3. Here two options, bishop e7 or queen e7, knight e7, maybe not a good idea because of the b7 pawn. Let's say something like bishop e7, one option, rook takes d3, here queen c8. Looks okay for white. Probably here is also something like f5, which is more, which is likely stronger but more sophisticated. But in my opinion, easier here is to take on e7 with a queen, because queen takes d3 is not very attractive as to rook d8. And if you capture on e7, bishop e7, and capture on d3, black remains with a better position. I mean, not much, but still like more comfortable because we have a better structure due to the pawn on e3. This would be like a kind of variation where most people would be happy about, and what would they forget? That when you take a decision and when you, concentrate on only one variation, you forget to always at least try to make a list of at least 3 candidate moves before you go for one, because this would help you at least to not miss something. And here after rook d1, okay, e4, by the way, is category number 4 when it's about the calculation process, because first one is checks, second captures, third moves with a threat, fourth silent moves, prophylactical moves, protecting moves like e4. So captures here actually to consider is bishop takes c4, but this doesn't make sense because we just lose material after rook d7, king d7, and queen takes c4. So that's why we don't have captures, we don't have checks. e4 we checked out, but the category of moves with a threat we still have available. Here also what is interesting, the queen at the moment takes over 2 jobs and we have an opposition. At the first glance, the opposition looks like more a problem for black because the queen is more valuable than the rook. But sometimes these oppositions can work in an opposite direction if we change something or if we, apply to certain tools which actually this position has to give. When we speak about moves with a threat, we have bishop c2 as one option, but we also have the attacking move of b5. And at least, according to the rules of calculation, we should take both of them in consideration. Bishop c2 we see immediately doesn't make much sense. White takes, white is happy, and story is over. b5, however, looks at the first glance very strange because the pawn can be taken twice, but it changes a lot in the coordination of white because, white had at the beginning, as I already mentioned, so many dependencies connected. And after b5, the whole coordination, stability of white breaks apart, because if the queen takes, it loses the protection of d1 and also runs into bishop takes c4, where the queen and the rook is attacked. If you take on d7, we take on b5 and we are happy. Probably you should play something like queen a4. Here bishop d3 is one consideration. However, I think rook takes d3 is not the move we want to see. And queen e6 probably is the easiest one. Even if b3, we have always bishop e2 and bishop d5 as emergency cases. So I think here in this position, black is a piece up and the compensation, in my opinion, is not sufficient. So that leaves the move after b5, bishop takes b5, but bishop takes b5 runs into the same problem. After bishop takes b5, now the queen is attacked on a4, so nothing really changes. Now if queen b3, because queen takes b5 doesn't work, as to queen takes d1. If queen b3, then I believe the simplest solution here is now bishop d3, because okay, c6 is not an issue anymore. And well, objectively speaking, there's not much to discuss, because here the position is just much better for black, as we have material up, and I'm not sure how you want to get this guy back, as there's always, when you play something like e4 to prevent e4, there's even an additional check on c5. Yes, bishop takes t3, to take a piece or a pawn or not to take, this is always, of course, the question. Here it was, in my opinion, psychologically much easier, because we saw we had the emergency solution with e4. Yet when you calculate variations, especially all these kind of forced lines, try to really keep track of the system or algorithm of calculation, and try to promise to yourself not to stick to only one line, but to try to at least get 2 or 3 candidate moves for each variation, or for each part of the calculation process, because this way you will see more, plunder less, and maybe have a more successful result at the end.